Okay, so this is Chris from Rekkid Talk. So I'm doing the Jazz Bums Challenge. So the Jazz Bums are these three guys: Chris, too many Chris's. I called dibs on the name. Chris, Mike, and Felipe. And so, as the name would indicate, these guys like jazz. They tend to talk about jazz. Um, I have at least a side interest in jazz, and I'm going to go ahead and participate. Even though I'm going to be showing 5 records, it's probably not going to be in 5 minutes. I'll probably will take longer than 5 minutes, but I probably won't take a lot longer than 5 minutes because I'm not educated enough to ramble on forever about jazz. So basically, what they want you to show is an album each from what they're calling the four big jazz labels: Blue Note, Prestige, Impulse, and Riverside. And then you pick a fifth jazz label to serve as your wild card. And so I've watched a couple other people's videos with this thread. I certainly haven't watched all the videos made on this thread. So if I'm repeating an album somebody else used, I'm sorry. Um, a couple of the labels in particular, I'll be honest, I was fairly limited in choices. So let's go with Blue Note to start off with. And so I'm going to use Herbie Hancock, Taken Off. So this was the debut album of Herbie Hancock as a leader. In 1962. So this was before the jazz funk time of the 70s. You can see he does have a pretty strong lineup there. He's got Freddie Hubbard on trumpet, Dexter Gordon on tenor sax, Butch Warren on bass, Billy Higgins on drums. So basically hard bop style. There is the original version of Watermelon Man is on here. That certainly got funked up a decade or so later on the Headhunters album that people probably know more. Next one is Prestige. I was very limited with my Prestige choices. I have this Yusuf Latif double album, which is basically a compilation of work. This was released in 1972, but it's a compilation of work that Yusuf had put out on new jazz in the late 50s and early 60s. My understanding is everything on this record came out on albums that had been released by Latif between 1959 and 1961. So Yusuf Latif is a pretty interesting guy. I think he was Muslim, but he wasn't Nation of Islam Muslim. And later in his life, he refused to play in establishments that served alcohol. Multi-instrumentalist, so he would play saxophone, he would play flute, oboe, bassoon, a lot of non-Western instruments, some instruments that might have at least some similarities to some of those woodwinds that I'd been naming off. He really didn't like the term jazz. Especially a lot of the later work to come after this stuff was blended with Eastern music, maybe world music before they called it world music. This is kind of hard bop modal stuff from this particular time period. Impulse, I'm going to go ahead and go with a John Coltrane album. And this is a recent pickup from the Vinyl Me Please world. So this was the Sunship that Vinyl Me Please recently reissued. So this was released in 1971. So obviously, I think 4 years after Coltrane's death. This had been recorded in 1965. It was one of the last times that his traditional quartet with himself on sax, McCoy Tyner on piano, Jimmy Garrison on bass, Elvin Jones on drums. Rudy Van Gelder is not present for this particular session. And when you listen to it, you can kind of see why they didn't release it until 1971. Not that I don't like it, because I do. Also, weirdness. He's playing soprano sax on the cover, but he's playing tenor sax on the album, so I don't know where they came up with this picture. But there you go. And so this is pretty experimental, free jazzy in places, post-boppy in places. And so if you want to hear Blue Train, or you want to hear him playing standards, this is not the album for that. A little bit more adventurous out there than that. Riverside, again, I don't have a lot of choices. I'm going with another Vinyl Me Please classics from a few years ago. Sonny Rollins with his Freedom Suite, 1958. So, of course, this is a trio with Sonny Rollins on tenor sax, Oscar Pettiford on bass, Matt Roach on drums. So there's no piano in his particular lineup, and there's a long suite. The Freedom Suite is the main basis of the album. Lots of changes in tempo, starting light, going lots of heavier stuff along the way. Never gets boring. There's also a few more standards along the way as well. A Noel Coward, and so there's what's on there in case you're interested. And then finally, to pick a fifth label, I've chosen to pick CTI. So, of course, rest in peace. We recently lost Creed Taylor. I think this actually happened after the Jazz Bums guys originally posted their challenge, because I think they posted it a couple weeks ago. So this might be a little bit on the cheesy side, but I'm going to go with Diodato Prelude. I remember this album from when I was a kid because my parents had this album. This came out in 1973, so I would have been 4 years old when this came out. They had Herbie Hancock Headhunters as well. So I remember both of these. So sort of jazz funk pop led by the Brazilian keyboardist. I may butcher his name. Eumir Deodato. So he plays keyboards, mostly electric piano on here. This album, of course, is known for the Richard Strauss from the 2001. Also Sprach Zarathustra. And that was, of course, actually a big pop hit. Ended up winning a Grammy for Pop Instrumental Performance, I believe, in 1974. Basically, with Diodato, I think I like his sort of jazzy, poppy arrangements of classics. There's a Debussy on this record as well, better than his original compositions. Some of the sidemen that appear on here include Stanley Clarke, Billy Cobham, John Tropez, among many others. So there you go. Chris and Felipe and Mike, you jazz bums. We got the 4 big labels. CTI is pretty big too. I got them in. I guess I could have done black jazz, or I could have seen how weird I could get, but didn't go there.